drivers fighting for their life to get into the big race on Sunday. Big name drivers going to backup cars. And let's talk about Toyota sweeping the night. Let's talk about NASCAR's Daytona duels. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about this year's NASCAR duel races at Daytona to set the lineup for the 2024 Daytona 500. We had some big accidents, some intense battles to get into the Daytona 500 for open cars in the final laps, but in the end we had two Toyotas win both races this season, and we'll go ahead and break all of that stuff down. Let's start out by talking about the first race tonight. That was duel number 1, where Tyler Reddick was able to get the win, making some bold moves there in the final lap to get by all those Chevy drivers, beat Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Carson Hocevar, shoved Kyle Larson up out of the way on the final lap. What a race that was to the finish. Some bold moves by Tyler Reddick, but everyone in the end kept it clean. No big wreck on the final lap of really either races, which is certainly good to see. You love good, hard racing at Daytona. That's what Daytona is about, and we saw that in both duel races. But good win for Tyler Reddick. I think the Toyotas definitely showed up tonight. It'll be interesting to see how that correlates into the Daytona 500. It seems like the Toyotas tend to work very well at Daytona. Once again, the Fords, the Toyotas have new body styles, so we're going to continue to watch that going into Sunday, hopefully weather depending, but hopefully going into Sunday and for the rest of the weekend. We have 2 more practice sessions, so I wanted to mention that. Just quick, we'll go through the top 10 for the duel races. Once again, these do set the lineup for the Daytona 500, so obviously Tyler Reddick will now start in the 3rd position, and then of course Chase Elliott will start in the 5th position, and then you have Alex Bowman, who finished 3rd tonight. Decent run for Alex Bowman. Once again, those Chevy teams were really working very well together with that old body style, which we talked about. You had Carson Hocevar, solid run for him, run very well, was running up front, making some good moves, didn't cause any trouble, which is good. That's what we like to see out of rookie drivers. Carson Hocevar, we know he has talent. It'll be interesting to see how he does on Sunday with a pretty decent starting position inside the top 10 for the Daytona 500 on Sunday. We'll have to see what he can do with it. Can he run up front for some time? We'll see if the experience pays off at the end, or if we'll have another young driver up front when it comes down to it. Eric Jones, solid run for him. And then, of course, you see all the way down at the end of the pylon, you have Joey Logano, your pole sitter, in 7th, but you see Kyle Larson in 9th, who was leading at the end of this race, kind of got shoved out of the way by everybody else, sort of pushed up the racetrack there, but Kyle Larson knew the situation, no need to go down, cause a wreck in your Daytona 500 primary car, so Larson just kind of rode up high, lost a few positions, ended up finishing 9th, so it's interesting. We'll see how that all moves over into Sunday. Now, we did have a couple of big storylines in that first duel race, and that was going to be Jimmie Johnson versus J.J. Yeley. This is besides, obviously, racing for the win. This was to get into the Daytona 500. Jimmie Johnson was not guaranteed in. There is no provisional. He's a part-time driver without a charter. Therefore, that 84 race car was not guaranteed into the 500. J.J. Yeley, driving the NY Racing Team, number 44, had the opportunity to get in. You see here, J.J. Yeley in the bright green car just goes up the racetrack a little bit. You see that bright blue, Richard Petty blue car on the inside lane, in the middle lane. Barely gets by him. What a race. That was a good race by both drivers. You even see J.J. Yeley try to do a little bit of a side draft just to give himself a chance. But no dirty racing all night long. Those two raced each other very well. They were aggressive all night long, trying to manipulate the air, slow each other down, pass each other. So that was a lot of fun to watch all night. Two drivers that are, I would say both of those drivers are veterans. J.J. Yeley, maybe not as much success as far as winning championships go in NASCAR, but he has been around for a long time. So nice to see both of those drivers racing respectfully at the end of that race to get in. So let's go ahead, and also before, Jimmie Johnson had a little bit of controversy. There was a wreck in that race as well before. You see Jimmie Johnson get sideways, a few other drivers just kind of get stacked up there. They kept calling it the accordion effect on the broadcast, where drivers just get slow, backed up, and you see the accordion effect there, multiple drivers involved. And actually in that same picture, you see Austin Dillon, Cindric, and Jimmie Johnson. All 3 of those drivers have won Daytona 500. So that was interesting to see that as well. Watching the broadcast. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on into duel number 2, the second duel, where Christopher Bell, another Toyota driver, was able to make some bold moves at the end and get the win. We saw those 4 drivers behind Christopher Bell making some bold moves as well. I'll go ahead and put the top 10 up now. You had Austin Cindric, Denny Hamlin making some strong moves. You had Austin Cindric kind of manipulate the 21 car, kind of push the 21 car out of the way on the final lap. Harrison Burton, probably not going to be too excited about that. Almost caused a wreck. That was definitely very aggressive moves by Austin Cindric. But remember, Austin Cindric has had heat after the duel races before. He's had Ryan Blaney upset with him. He potentially has another Ford driver that's not going to say he's going to be upset with him, but he's definitely not happy right now following the race. Austin Cindric has a Daytona 500 win in just his 3 starts going into his 4th Daytona 500 this season. So that'll be something, another storyline to sort of watch this season, as Austin Cindric already making aggressive moves in a Ford. It looks like the Fords are fast with the new body style at this racetrack. We'll have to watch that moving forward. I always try to pick some things out of these dual races to at least look at. It doesn't always correlate over. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But things to at least look forward to going into Daytona, right? We have to watch Austin Cindric at the end. Will he make those aggressive moves early at the end? It's always interesting to see. You have Denny Hamlin, solid 3rd place finish, was leading some at the end. Just couldn't quite get a run going. It seemed like, I think he got shuffled to the bottom lane and the top lane prevailed. So Denny Hamlin finishing in the 3rd position. John Hunter Nemechek, another rookie driver, finishing in the top 5, finishing in the 4th position, and Harrison Burton 5th. You see William Byron in 8th. Brad Keselowski, who unfortunately caused I wouldn't say he caused a big wreck, but was involved in a controversial big crash, finishes in the 7th position. And we'll talk about that next. We'll sort of move over into that now. That was on lap 48 of 60. We had a massive accident. You see it just starts getting shuffled around. It's once again that accordion effect with these cars in these big packs going 190, closer to 200 miles an hour. William Byron goes up the racetrack way slower than everybody else behind him. Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch. You see Kyle Busch in the green 8 car, and then you see Brad Keselowski in the darker number 6 car. Unfortunately, Kyle Busch was full throttle, and you can see on the side of the cars, on the throttle, you can see the flames coming out of the exhaust. That means they're getting off of the throttle. That's the way you can tell. Both drivers let off the throttle. Not enough time to react. You can't hit a driver, push a driver in that tri-oval. It's really just a bad situation. I'm looking at it and I'm trying to say, whose fault is this? I'm trying to say, is this William Byron's fault? Is this Blaney's fault? And I don't think it's either of their fault. You can sort of blame Brad Keselowski because it seems like this situation has happened around him a lot recently at Daytona, in the last 5 years. So you can point at him. You can point at Kyle Busch. But really, this wreck particularly, it's really hard to pinpoint one driver. It was more of that, once again, that accordion effect where you had a driver slide up the racetrack. Okay, that's not good. That's a mistake. But that's also partially to blame for the driver pushing them. Then you have the drivers pushing Kyle Busch, and then you have Brad K. So it's just really frustrating. It's just a bad situation. Glad Ryan Blaney was able to get out the car okay. Another really hard hit for him. He's had some hard hits the last couple of seasons. You go back to Daytona in the summer last year, scary accident. You go back to Nashville last year as well. Then you go back to tonight, some scary wrecks for Ryan Blaney. Glad to see him get out of the car okay. So that's certainly unfortunate for him. But those are some big name drivers going to backup cars. Ryan Blaney, potential favorite to win the Daytona 500, going to a backup car. Kyle Busch will be racing his 19th Daytona 500, sort of the bridesmaid of the Daytona 500. Been close many of times, but can't quite get it. Big name driver, 63 career wins already. He's going to a backup car for Daytona. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves over and if that will affect those. It obviously means more work for the teams, which is unfortunate. But we do have a practice session tomorrow afternoon. I think it's at 5 o'clock, 5:30. We do have that practice session. And weather depending, we have a practice session on Saturday morning as well. So we have a little bit of time for those drivers to get those cars and those backup cars and the primary cars to run a few laps, get the bugs settled out, and at least get that car running and get the engine hot. So I wanted to mention that as well. There will be 2 practice sessions scheduled too. I know it looks like we'll get the one in on Friday. Weather's still looking a little shaky for Saturday, and hopefully right now the weather doesn't look good for Sunday for the Daytona 500, but hopefully things clear off. It is Central Florida, so hopefully things clear off. We get the 500 in without any big problems. But that's it. I wanted to keep this one a little bit short and sweet. 2 dual races, exciting dual races. I had a lot of fun watching these. This was really fun dual races with the pit cycles, the strategy, and then, of course, you had the big one in one of these dual races as well. But so hopefully Daytona's just as exciting. I'll be here. I'll do a race recap following the Daytona 500, of course. And, of course, about Kyle Busch getting wrecked out early and going to a backup car. Let's get rowdy.